put your red shirt on and a brown coat too. Everybody's joining the crew. We got just one drink, let we rule them all. Hope you'd remember your thoughts. Get your Ulu feathers and your Middle-earth guns. A sonic screwdriver or a sword +1. Use Valerian steel if it will get you to come. To the pit, tank. To the pit, tank. The Rocky Mountain Geek Tank.
Hi, I'm Guy.
Hi, I'm Troy.
Hi, I'm Alex.
And this is Geek Tank.
Your complete collection with extra common sized podcast.
Today we have a special guest, and we'll be bringing him out. Hi, Brent.
I'm going to hit the button. You ready?
Hit the button and bring him in.
Hi, Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
We're doing great.
We're
Thank you
good.
for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Yep. So we have our regular viewer, Brent. We always say hi to him. He's always
We
here.
got Justin, too.
Justin. Sweet.
I don't know whether that's a...
That's probably one of the new people who've come to watch, which is awesome. So we were going to be talking tonight about something that my two co-hosts only know a little bit of, which is Heroscape, which is
fine.
Tabletop game. I kind of remember at least playing one game with you, Alex, if I'm remembering correctly.
I played a couple games. Yeah,
Okay.
it was a long time ago.
Yeah, like 2005, I think, or something.
Yeah, before I was a father.
Yes. Before I think any of us were fathers. Maybe.
Yes, actually, we all like...
Well, maybe not Adam. I don't know.
We know.
I became a father mere months after I started playing Heroscape in 2008. My first son was born in 2009. I started playing Heroscape in fall of 2008.
Sweet.
Oh,
Yeah. It's so maybe Heroscape's the cause for pregnancies.
Or maybe Heroscape is the... Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Heroscape, little background for anybody who doesn't know about it. I'm noticing we have a lot of people over from the Heroscaper site, so that's awesome. Thank you for joining the show tonight. I should thank Adam because Adam's pulling his famedom is bringing all of them over here. Heroscape's game started, I want to say, like 2004, 2005. Was originally targeted for the younger crowd, like I'd say maybe ages 9 through 15. Little miniature battle game that has two different versions. One's way too easy and the other version's just right. And I had found out about it through a friend of mine who had started playing and said, this is a great game, you should try it out. Tried it out, then I started buying everything that I could because it is a really fun game. It went for a few years and had a few different sets, and then eventually at some point it shifted over to the D&D aspect because I think Wizards somehow came involved. Or we lost Adam.
We lost Adam. He'll come back.
He'll come back.
There he is.
Now Adam back in. I said Adam back in. That was a totally unintentional pun there.
Now I can see everybody. Before I couldn't see and hear anybody except you.
So wow.
Now I can see everybody, so it's excellent.
Sweet. And so in that and then I can't remember if it's because Hasbro acquired Wizards of the Coast or how that worked out that they ended up with D&D, but they did a D&D version, and
right.
Then it sort of vanished and went away, and
yes.
I
discontinued in early 2011 or early 2011. It was discontinued. Yeah, not too long after Wizards of the Coast was put in charge of it. So Hasbro kind of gave the property to Wizards of the Coast. And Wizards of the Coast, in their standard fashion, just looks at anything and sees how does this help D&D or Magic. So they made it. They made a D&D master set and some and produced a few more waves of figures, and then discontinued it. And then they made a standalone Magic game, Arena of the Planeswalkers, which used similar rule set and terrain. So.
Yes, and I always had a speculation that was why they pulled Heroscape away, is that somebody had the bright idea of trying to magicify it, and that's when that failed horribly. It went back and went away again. Although it wasn't nearly as good as Heroscape, but it was enough like Heroscape that it was still fun to play.
Yeah.
But now,
are you able to do the Planeswalkers games with Heroscape rules?
So you could use all of the figures from Arena of the Planeswalkers in Heroscape if you wanted to. It wasn't really balanced against the Heroscape stuff. Like we actually did play. I played like a tournament where we did that, and it was like the Planeswalker stuff was just way overpowered compared to regular Heroscape because you could just drop. Because the summoning mechanic just ended up being super strong. You could just drop a figure right into action and use it right away. Whereas normally in Heroscape, it's a lot about planning and positioning and managing your turns and getting your figures into the right positions from a start zone in the back. Whereas the Planeswalker just kind of wanders up and drops the figure exactly where they want it. So
it was very thematic for Wizards to op stuff.
Of course.
And then throw it in there.
What? Planeswalkers are kind of busted? Gee, who
knew?
would have thought?
Yeah, who knew?
This has been Alex's ongoing gripe for quite a while.
Oh, I also should have mentioned, since we have people from Heroscapers, you might know me on there as Rosenkrantz, and then you most definitely know Adam from there as Doc. So as our handles.
Because I'm noticing that they're all talking in the forums, and by the way, I'm seeing them coming in from YouTube and from Facebook. So
yeah,
Brent, you may not be seeing them because you're coming in on Facebook. They're coming in on YouTube. So just so you're aware, we on our master screen over here, we can see where people are coming from by the icons. So
right, yeah, I can see it.
Cool. And so more recently, I want to say within the past week or two, Hasbro has relaunched Heroscape essentially with their HasLab, which is sort of their version of Kickstarter, which they've done several things. I've backed Hero Quest on there when they did that. I feel like one of our friends did one of the Transformer things they did, but I can't remember who that was and what that would have been. But it's a sort of similar format to Kickstarter, but not exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed like a good time to come talk about it because a lot of people never had heard of Heroscape.
Right.
And it's a really fascinating game. You were trying to make a space game, I think, out of the hexes at one point, right, Guy?
Totally. And it's because I like the mechanics that were easier. I'm a Starfleet Battles guy, and attack.
Craig Van Ness made that one as well, right?
I'm sorry?
Didn't Craig Van Ness make Starfleet Battles as well?
No, Starfleet Battles goes back a long ways.
I wonder if he made a relaunch of it. What was there was a game.
There's Federation Commander, which is a newer version of it, but that's all from Task Force Games a billion years ago, and it was Steve. I just lost it. Steve Cole and Steve somebody, but I had their names. So, but yeah, they made it a billion years ago. It was in '77. And they got the rights to Star Trek, the original series,
right?
Made their own universe out of it.
I'm thinking of a different. He made his own game after Heroscape discontinued. It was sort of a similar style, but anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, if it is, I'm interested.
Yeah, they did do. As somebody just mentioned in here too, I was going to say it. They did a Galaxies Battleship Galaxies, and so
I'm writing that down, people.
And that's one of those games that I have in a box and never opened. Just because I have a lot of games I have yet to play. And I kind of remember somebody mentioning to me at one point that it was similar to Heroscape in a way.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was Colby Dodge, and I think Craig Van Ness was involved as well. So, I mean, and Jerry Hawthorne. Yeah, so it's a lot of the guys who were working on Heroscape in the the later stage.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, so it's a lot of the same guys. So yeah, they definitely have that. It has that same aesthetic, and of course, Summoner Wars was the product that launched Plaid Hat Games, and that was also similar in a lot of ways to Heroscape, and entirely card based, no models, but Colby made that game, and he was one of the main developers for Heroscape in the sort of the latter half of its original run. So
yeah. Well, that was what I was doing. Was I was taking the hexes and I was sort of making an idea where the terrain had. Space terrain. It was effectively the higher the lower it took for them to go through it and stuff like that, so that you could have the effect. Because I liked the idea of terrain. Because one of the biggest problems with space battles, of course, is that you just have a big open plane. And
well, it's more like a sea battle because it's all two dimensional.
The reason I always dislike games like X-Wing is that I just any game where I have to pull out a ruler to move my units, I'm out. Like it's too much. It's too fiddly for me. So and that's why it was one of the things I really love about Heroscape is that hex-based terrain, and it's really the best terrain of that style that's been made for any game that I've ever seen. I mean, just if you walk around, especially earlier years, nowadays the terrain's getting harder to find, although that's about to change hopefully. But especially like 2015, 4 years after that game was discontinued, if you walked around the Gen Con gaming floor, you would see Heroscape terrain repurposed all over the place for BattleTech, for all kinds of other games, even games that have really nothing to do with that, but like just a great building material for boards and stuff.
Well, BattleTech, I hadn't even thought about that, but that's literally what BattleTech's maps were terrained hexes.
Of course, yeah.
It's just that they were flat.
Right.
Heroscape using Heroscape's terrain for BattleTech would be riotously cool.
Yeah, it looked way cool. Absolutely, it was a great. That's why people love to use it. So. I haven't played BattleTech since I was in middle school, probably.
Same.
I did play it. It was a great game.
Yeah. Ah, Brent has moved over.
So he can
over on YouTube.
That's so he can see what other people are saying, so he can be part of that conversation. Yeah, before I'd heard about the new set's going to be called Age of Annihilation. Before I'd heard about that, I'd actually pulled out a lot of my snow terrain and ice terrain and used it for a D&D game because the players were arriving through a portal on a mountain with lots of snow, and it was really cool to have that terrain out for them to have their miniatures on.
Sure.
Yeah, it is. It's great for D&D. I've got to admit. I mean, the terrain's very useful for other things. I saw a knockoff sort of thing, which was kind of interesting, where they're selling their hexes, but they're magnetic so that they snap together. Yeah. But it's clearly somebody was like, hey, Heroscape's got a good idea, because the way they have it set up, I'm like, oh, you stack the terrain up, you connect them together.
Yeah, I think you're talking about high ground.
Green, red. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, but I mean, I think the Heroscape terrain is the bang for your buck on it is pretty fantastic, and that's actually something people are saying about the Age of Annihilation box, because it is a pricey thing to back. It's $250 roughly, but I mean, there's people saying, either they'll buy extra terrain and sell the minis, or they'll or they just want the minis, they'll sell the terrain. I mean, and you could go either way, because those components, I mean, will be pretty valuable on the resale market, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm noticing how many people used Heroscapes in school presentations. I mean, like, this is really useful. It's a very useful mechanic, but it's got a lot of usefulness outside of just Heroscape,
for sure,
which is fascinating to me. Just an interesting side note on that one. So,
I was trying to find a picture. I noticed that the picture I had pulled up originally for the new stuff wasn't using their terrain. It was using old terrain. I was trying to get a picture of the new terrain stuff, since we were talking about terrain. And I'm failing horribly at it.
Your Google Who is...
Well, I'm on their website. I thought it would. I'm just doing
it really Google it. I have often found that dropping out to Google and Googling it to get to their website often works, because it'll give a link directly to whatever.
Maybe that's what I need to do. Page. So, what was your first experience with of Heroscape there, Adam?
It was fall 2008, and I was up at somebody's vacation house near Rocky Mountain National Park. Just a friend of mine, and he had just bought this game, and he pulled it out, and we played. And it was one of those things where, at the time, I wasn't really heavily into board games as a hobby. Like I'd played Catan, I'd played other games, but I wasn't like a collector of games or anything like that. But I immediately recognized, like, the first time I played it, that like this game is more than just like I knew from my experience from video games, from my experience from other communities, like, there's a website out there where there's people who are super into the strategy of this game, and there's people who are really into this. I could just tell. So like, I found Heroscapers.com within a week. I played my friend a few more times, but I quickly moved on to like being way more serious into it than he was, and just posted a lot on Heroscapers and got really into it, and ended up we had our first local event the next fall, in fall 2009, and that was when I met you, Troy. And it was you and me and Dave and a bunch of the old crew, and there's a few of them are still active actually now. We just saw them for the first time in years, and we were up in Boulder Library. We played a tournament there, and we just kept having them. And then I went to Gen Con the next year, and the rest is history. I became the infamous doc on Heroscapers.com after that.
Did you win your first year?
I won the championship my first year. And yeah, for the other guys, like, yeah, I've won. Who the best player in Heroscape is entirely a matter of interpretation. But
any game with dice involved,
right? Well, yeah, I mean, on a given day, and it's not like I don't make mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes when I play Heroscape, and I think something I actually like to say is that the sign of a good player is that they recognize their mistakes, like because bad players blame dice, good players try to find the teaching moment in why things went south.
I think that goes.
I would say I'm the most accomplished tournament Heroscape player. I've won more Gen Con events than anyone. I've won more Gen Con championships. I've won a bunch online. Online would be a fun thing to get into if you want to talk about that, because after things.
You mentioned the Heroscapers, and that was because when I got into it was Dave and his friend Eric were into it.
Right, Eric was there too. I remember that.
And they're the ones who showed it to me, and I immediately recognized the use of the game outside of the game, because I played a lot of role-playing games and stuff as well.
Sure.
And so it had double duty for me. And so I got into it heavily, and I want to say it was pretty quickly when it came out is when I had gotten into it, because I didn't play heavily. But then at one point, David said, "Oh, there are tournament events and stuff. You should come to one of those." And that's when I came to the one up in Boulder. And I thought it was really cool, because they're like, by the way, it was sometime after that where they're like, "Yeah, that's the guy who won Gen Con." That's the way they would introduce you to me, type of thing.
Right.
Right. But it was
at that point I was just the local guy. It was only a year later that I got out to Gen Con. But yeah,
our regular viewers noticing that we're also on Twitch. Yeah, we were back on our fully operational StreamYard battleship. So
Battle Station.
StreamYard
Station.
So it's
StreamYard Station.
But I played on and off, and I managed to make it to one Gen Con, because Gen Con is a pricey endeavor to get into, even when you have like 7 roommates paying for a hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really fun. I didn't win, but I still had a lot of fun playing. Then eventually I fell off, and then I learned more about Heroscapers, and Heroscapers were working on at the time an online version of the game, because there was no official online version, and it's just using Google Word docs with JPEGs, and then I don't know the names. I apologize.
Yeah, it's evolved a bit. Yeah, so we started doing it way back, like 2011 is when it really started, and at first it was like, what people setting up webcams and things like that. But what somebody developed quickly an app that you could like click, like you could both log into the same thing, and you could click like, I'm rolling this many dice, and it would display your results. So then we used to have like a dice arbiter on the website. And then what somebody figured out was that you could basically because people make tournament maps, and there's tons and tons of tournament maps. There's judging of tournament maps. There's sort of people trying to refine them, make them more balanced, more interesting for more dynamic gameplay. And there's a software package where you can lay them out, and it creates build instructions for you. And one of the other things you can do in that software is you can make a top-down picture of the map. So what somebody realized is you could make that image, put it up as a Google drawing, and then have little images for the figures, and just as other little images in there, and you could drag, just using your mouse, just drag and move them around on the map. So basically then both people would share this Google drawing, and they'd have the little dice app up, and that was how people played online. And it's gotten a little bit fancier than that in the years since then. Now we like have the level numbers on the terrain so that you know how high things are without having to like eyeball it, and it's all integrated in one interface, so you don't have to like keep 2 web pages up, one for dice rolling and one for the map. And the images, instead of being little pogs with the picture of the dude on them, they're actually like top-down images of the figures that you can move around. So if you look at it, it looks like you're staring straight down on a map, more or less. So it's evolved a little, but it's still pretty much that same system that we were using in like 2012 or 2013.
Mhm.
And
I've played more online Heroscape games than I've played in life Heroscape games.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
because it removes that the time of setup and breakdown of the
Yeah.
maps. It makes it easier to schedule with people because you don't have to actually travel to someone's house. You just sit down in front of your computer and play.
Yeah.
I thought it was an amazing thing.
I actually that was one of the things that, is it on, that's a good question. Is it on Tabletop Simulator?
It is that now Tabletop Simulator, it's never really taken off there. I think the supers community uses it. So the customs community had, in the wake of Heroscape being discontinued, really took off. And there's sort of a semi-official group of customs that people have developed to expand on the original Heroscape canon. And as of like this year, I think there's slightly more of those figures than there were originally. So like there are 200 some original figures, and there's like 200 customs at this point. But then basically people have made superhero figures, which there was only the one Marvel set that had like 8 or 10 figures in it. That has been running, and they've made over 1,000 figures. I think they're up to like 1,500 figures.
Mhm.
Something insane.
Because they have a huge stock of source material. Right. They just pull out any superhero and go to town.
Exactly. The development process is very different there. But be that as it may, like it's still incredibly impressive to me, the sheer quantity and the fact that they've got a fully fleshed game, and in my opinion, it's the most fun sort of Heroscape superhero battle miniature game in existence is actually that custom game, because the Heroscape system actually works really well for it. So they use Tabletop Simulator a fair amount. It never really took off for so-called classicscape or using the original canon. We would have had to import a lot of the maps, and the way we ran our tournaments, we always wanted it to be really accessible. So we didn't want to tell someone they had to buy Tabletop Simulator to play in our events. So
makes sense.
But I mean, it does exist. People do use Tabletop Simulator for it.
So back a little earlier on, Evan had said, why did it start that way, and has it evolved over time? I'm presuming we're still talking about the app. Is that correct, Evan? I'm just kind of paraphrasing here. Didn't want to lose you guys over there.
And remember, there's a delay, so it'll take a moment for your question to reach him about his question.
Trickle down to us.
Yeah, I think that was about the time that we were talking about how the online game got started.
I think he's saying it's going. I think maybe he doesn't like the online interface. I mean, it's not for everyone. Some people don't.
OHS.
Like it. Yeah. OHS is sort of the acronym for Online Heroscape that we use a lot for the events that get run. I mean, it's not for everyone. I would say, for me, I think I could probably play a game faster online than I can any other format. Faster than in person, faster than on Tabletop Simulator. That interface, because I've used it many times, for me it's a really quick and fun way to play. But I mean, you do lose a little bit of that tactile fun. And for me, actually, one of the best things that's become more and more popular over the years is people having a voice connection while they play. It was pretty rare back in 2011, but now everybody does that. And to me, the best part, well, not the best part, but a great part of Heroscape is that sort of that social interaction part of it, that you're talking to this person, you're interacting with this person while you play. If I'm just sitting off, siloed in my world while this other person's there, and we can and we're just throwing dice and revealing order markers, and it's not the same experience as playing live, but when I have a voice connection with someone, I can just talk to them while we play. It really does feel to me the same as playing live.
Yeah, the only real downside I saw to it, which was very minor for the online Heroscape, is because it's two-dimensional.
Yeah.
If you get into that question of line of sight or kind of figure fit here, which the biggest thing about Heroscape that I like, because there's a lot of things I like about it. Out of all of the gaming communities I know,
Jonathan, I'll get to your question in a second.
Heroscape has been the friendliest community I've ever been a part of in the gaming community.
Yeah.
Because we talked a couple of weeks ago about the Timmy Johnny Spike model that Magic uses, and Heroscape really pulls on a lot of Timmys because we like to play with toys. We like the three-dimensional aspect of those things. Yeah. And I think that type of mindset really brings in the kind of person who wants to be friends and is very friendly themselves.
Right.
So because of that, when you get the well, do I have line of sight to your guy or not? Usually, it's not a very heated dispute. Two people can come to an agreement pretty easily, or they're just say, "Oh, let's dice off and see who wins the dice off."
Right.
Yeah, it's a very welcoming community, and I mean, it's definitely a big reason why I've stayed involved over the last decade. Since it got discontinued. Besides just loving the game, is that it has been just a great community to be a part of.
So Jonathan asked, and he's about to go off the screen, so I'm going to.
Oh, I see.
What is your design development process? So we're moving on to that next section, which I think we need to kind of at least give an introduction on.
Yes, so I want to real quickly touch on how I'm sure this originated because of Heroscapers. They developed the team for the CV for custom variants or custom.
Right. So C3V. God, what is it? Classic Custom Creations of Valhalla, something.
Okay. Okay, but if they were going to make new material for it, the community, they knew that they wanted it to be balanced and play tested thoroughly, and so they developed their team to really play test stuff and make sure that you weren't putting something out there that was a Black Lotus that was just going to be overpowered.
Right.
And that team is really good at what they do, and.
I would say beyond that, we got a lot better over the years. I mean, in C3V, the strongest and weakest stuff we ever produced was in the earliest things we did in the customs community, and just, I mean, which applies to Magic too. You look at the original Magic set, you have like Animate Wall, which is like a completely garbage card, Black Lotus, right? It's like so it's the same thing, and I think you look at a lot of games, the strongest and weakest stuff is early on. So we definitely got better at it, and then I don't know. Do you want the story of kind of how I ended up in the development in Hasbro?
Yeah, I think that leads up to
that's the transition that we're headed for.
Yeah, that sets up the question. That sets you up to answer the question about the how the design develop. What's the design development process?
Right. So I think one of the things that surprised me a little bit when I started working on cards with Hasbro was how similar in some ways it was to developing for customs, because one of the things about when I was making customs was that we would find a mini that was appropriate and be like, all right, let's make a design for it. And that, so I didn't have like control of the whole process. It wasn't like I'd be like, I want to make skeleton cavalry and then get to like design the skeleton cavalry and make the mini. I do want to make skeleton cavalry, but there aren't any good pre-painted skeleton cavalry minis, so I never did. But then when I got to Hasbro, it was sort of like, Craig Van Ness would be like, okay, well, we're going to make a faction of cyborgs, so you got to design some cyborgs. And I'd make some designs, and then art would come back, and the art would look maybe a little different than what I thought, so I'd like adjust the designs. But it was kind of a little bit of a back and forth in that, like, they would look at what I had thrown up as sort of a prototype design, and then they would make some drawings based upon that. And then I would look at it and be like, oh, well, that wasn't what I was thinking, but I can make something for that.
Right.
And things kind of did go back and forth. Like the minis would come back a little different than I expected. So there's been some give and take there, and that adaptability to what I've been handed that I learned from the custom design process definitely served me well here as well. But as far as the actual process goes, it was a lot of the same idea in that, like, we try to kind of hammer down a design and go back and forth and refine it and make it flow well, and then get it into play testing and play test it with some armies and see how it plays. Oh, this power actually felt really clunky on the board, even though it seemed nice. Let's rework that, and just you just kind of churn it back and forth until you get it where you want. And it was a lot of work. And we brought in some extra blood in the last few months. At first, there were only a few of us working on it, and then we added a few more people, and they were enormously helpful in getting us over the finish line in terms of getting the cards to where they are now, which is maybe not 100% finalized. There may still be, if you see a card design, which I think some of them are being sent off to some creators to some content creators to do playtesting. If you see a design there may be like numbers that change. There may be D20 cutoffs or point values or stats that change, but we're pretty solid on the designs at this point.
Right. We need to take a real quick break here
for station identification.
Station identification, and talk about our sponsors real quick.
You got it? You want me to get it?
I got it.
Okay.
Ready? Okay. Geek Tank is sponsored by Kieran Games, Geekway Homes, and Your Mom. All right. There we go. It's our quick little stop there. Heading in there, and now we can get back to regularly scheduled things. So, Matt was saying, why did you change the cards, not the numbers?
So for those, I know what he's talking about.
So, I assume you know what that means. Thanks.
Yes, I do. So Heroscape. Let me grab one.
Yeah.
Off he goes. And now we can say,
here's Thanos.
Yeah.
Just the first one I grabbed. I just have a bin of cards. So Heroscape has this very sort of distinctive, weird shape to its cards, which is this sort of
shape,
a hexagonal shape. This is actually the shape of the 7 hex terrain tile. Like if you have a 7 hex terrain tile, you can literally slap these in there and you almost use it as a carrying case. So although nobody ever stores them that way, but what people do often do, and you can see I'm doing right here, is people have these CD sleeves. Some people will get like a whole big, like the old school books where you could put CDs in them. These the plastic sleeve here fits your card.
It's about the same size as a CD.
It's about the same size as a CD, exactly.
And because of my fumbling fingers, I have a fair number of cards that have rips in them from trying to put them in those things.
Right. So that's the classic card shape. And there's original. I don't know exactly what the shape. Because I've been working with proxies and all my testing or testing online, so I have not seen a card any more than any of the people in your comment section have. But they the plan has been to make the card
something more
hexagonal,
streamlined,
which would essentially just be more or less, it would be like filling in the gaps here. There's a few good reasons to do that. I'm just speaking as a Heroscape player. One is that these things, as Troy said, they're fairly easy to rip. They're easy to get dog-eared. They're hard to just kind of shove in things. And also they're just not an efficient use of space. Like you can't really have a big image of the figure. You don't have a lot of room for the text. So having something that just having it be a little bit more of a full shape gives you more room to have a larger font size. It gives you more room to have bigger art, of the figure. So that was the logic. I don't know what's going to happen. Some of this stuff is still in flux. They may decide they want to use the old card shape. They may decide they want to do that. They may decide they want to have like almost like a big tarot card thing that like fills the whole sleeve. There's a lot of ways they could go. It may end up being something where they come back for community input. I don't know what's going to happen. In some ways, I don't know any more than anybody else.
Right.
I'm working on development of designs.
Yeah, you're the creative team, not the.
I don't have a lot of influence or control beyond that. Right?
That's the important part. Is will it fit in a CD sleeve? I think.
That was something that we brought up because I knew about this before it was announced. I'd heard that they were planning on going to hexagonal shape, and that was something we brought up. Is that like, hey, a lot of people store these in CD sleeves. Make sure they still fit.
Right.
So,
and if they're hexagonal instead of hexagonal, if they are, you could pretend like you're playing Battlestar Galactica cards because that's what they were.
Right. So
there we go, crossing geekdoms.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and hexagonal kind of matches the actual tiles, and of course you're probably under some sort of NDA.
Yes, I am.
So,
I'm not going to be able to discuss specifics of designs, which is honestly, 90% of what I know that's governed by an NDA is just like what powers does Sergeant Drake have? What powers does this guy have? That kind of stuff. So, which I won't be getting into specifics on that.
Right. Yeah. I did want to just bring up from an earlier tangent. You said that the community is very friendly. Honestly, if the community wasn't welcome and opening, the Hasbro lab wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
They would not.
I think it's a good.
It'd be a community. It'd be small. It'd be toxic. There would be not a larger market. Have fun kit bashing your own stuff, people.
Right.
So.
Right. I mean, Heroscape. It is going to end up being and this is just the nature of, I think, the industry, is going to end up being a little bit of a different market. I think part of the reason that the Heroscape is such a great community, and different than a lot of similar sort of competitive board games, is that Heroscape was originally a mass market game. And a lot of people who bought it were dads who wanted to play with the toys with their kid, and they saw it in Target or Walmart, and they bought it and played it, and then people got obsessed with it because it's a really fun game. In some ways, it was kind of the most immersive board game that you could get in those stores. The biggest, most complex, most immersive board game you could get in those stores. So, so that community was a lot of a lot of family gamers, a lot of sort of dads with their kids and things like that, and that's part of why it has such a friendly atmosphere, I think, is that it's evolved from that. Unfortunately, the nature of the industry is that like this isn't going to get sold in Walmart. Like Walmart's never going to sell a $250 game box, and nobody can talk their mom into buying that one. So
this is very niche.
It will end up being a little bit more niche. I think that's just the nature of the cost of plastic, the cost of painting. We don't have Chinese slave labor to paint our minis anymore, which is a good thing in some sense, but
certainly not a bad thing.
Yes.
So we've got from Justin, who's asking, what was your inspiration for the new factions you designed?
Is that something you can cover?
That you can cover from the
right. I could talk about it sort of broadly. I mean,
that's Brent. That's what we were talking about. Troy and I were like, we'll just.
First of all, is that like I didn't pick the factions. That was mostly Craig Van Ness, who's the main designer of Heroscape. Was sort of like, but I did have a lot of latitude on how to try to implement a faction. Basically, he said, hey, design a steampunk faction, right? And then we discussed like how would a steampunk faction work in Heroscape? How would you, what would these figures be like? And then I like to think about a unifying mechanic for a gameplay mechanic for a faction. Like what can this faction do that will make sense for that faction and that will work for a whole bunch of units in that faction. I mean, this is something I think you see in a lot of game designs.
I imagine one of the most complex things about designing, even before this, just doing the C3B stuff, is being able to look at everything, because you have to worry about how's the synergy going to work, because you don't want to make that one thing that you overlooked. That's, all of a sudden when I put this unit with that unit, that's what everybody's going to play now because it's unbeatable.
Right.
And nobody's going to play.
And that was actually something we talked about quite a bit. Like we did a fair amount of testing with like some of the more sort of broken units in Heroscape, Raylan, Rats, things like that. But we usually would price them differently when we did, because it's not if you use a 40-point Rats and 80-point Raylan, which is their stock price, and you make a super strong army by adding something to it, it's kind of dog bites man. Like, yeah, if you take the best stuff and you throw this one other thing in, it's still going to be really good. Like, that doesn't really prove that the new thing is a problem. You just want to not create a new problem. And there were definitely times where we were like, holy cow, this thing is stronger than we expected. We need to dial this back. Or in some cases, it was like, there's often a tension when you're designing things, in that like you make a mechanic that really you like it because it hits theme, but there's a natural tendency to confuse theme and mechanic, to basically think the mechanics are the theme. So that then you're like, I can't change this, it is the theme. But then often there's a lot of different ways you can hit a theme. You can think of a different mechanic to do the same thing. So that's the magic of design to me. I like to say that, because I've been a lead on designs for the custom community, and now in the actual development. And the magic of being a lead on a design is to sort of understand what is the central theme you're trying to implement with this mini. And then that's step one. And then step two is being extremely flexible about how you get that theme, and being willing to change it and do something completely different. And just as long as you can say, well, does that still doing the thing? And if it's not, then maybe try something else. But don't be like the first thing I try, it has to be the thing. You don't keep hammering the same idea. So
I'm going to change layouts here real quick and do this so that there we go. Because I think people are talking to you, and so I'm like, rather than have all of us like I think this is a better layout. So
I was gonna say,
at a $250 price point, do you worry about going the way of Gloomhaven?
I mean, I worry about a lot of things.
yeah. Well, I'd like to reiterate, this is the creative guy, not the business guy.
Right.
So,
Right. So I can't really get
you're in the loop. So I mean, is that something
look,
you guys are talking about? Is that
I mean, I'm absolutely worried that about it not getting enough backing. I mean, if it gets backed, there's going to be a lot of other products that come out that will be more affordable.
Right.
There's going to be terrain packs. There's going to be waves of individual figures. There's going to be follow-up sets that are
I think Hero Quest is a good example of that, because Hero Quest succeeded, and now you're seeing a couple of other little expansions popping out for Hero Quest as little stuff on its own. And from what I've heard, and I don't know if this is something covered or not that you can confirm or deny, but either way, I don't care, is that if this does not succeed, this is pretty much the trial by fire of Hasbro saying, is this worth our time?
Right.
And if it doesn't succeed, then they're going to be, this isn't worth our time.
I can't really comment on their specific business plans, except to say that I know that should this succeed, they definitely have follow-ups planned. I'll say, like, my concerns are those concerns about that price point keeps them from getting enough backers. I am very comfortable defending the value proposition of it as a 250 point box. I think that if you compare it to anything in the industry in the last 5 years, this is a massive amount of minis and a unique large amount of terrain that it is reasonable at this price point for sure. That doesn't mean that everybody has $250 to spend, and I can't convince somebody who doesn't have $250 to spend that they should. But I think I know people who are very confident they're like buying extras because they're like, these are going to be worth more than $250 on the secondary market anyway, which is probably true. So
are they compatible? Do they fit with the old sets?
Yes, the terrain is 100% compatible. The figures, we've been testing them the whole time against and with old figures. So,
yeah.
So it's wanted to come back to a couple of things. Trying to find the theme and the mechanics for gaming is a problem with all games, that they're always trying to balance that, especially when there's an IP involved, because you're trying to be true to a movie or something and not be too weird. Thematically, my favorite unit is the zombies, because their only targeting zones their head.
Yes.
And that when you kill other figures, you make more zombies. Which
we are brothers in zombie love for sure.
Sweet. And then
gross.
And then I was going to circle back to these miniatures. One of the big difference between the original stuff and this is they are unpainted, but they are also easily double, if not triple, the times of detail on these figures. They're way more detailed. I've repainted Heroscape figures, and it's not easy because there's not a lot of detail on there. You got to really work hard to create contours that aren't there. And there's little tricks you use as a painter too, where you do stuff like dry brushing, which the more detailed something is, the easier it is to pull off that type of trick. Right. These miniatures, for anyone who gets into painting or is already into painting, I think will find a lot of fun with these. And I intend on doing some 101 painting instructions for those people who are a little scared about painting the miniatures but are backing it and don't want to have just solid color figures.
Yeah, I can vouch for Troy's painting prowess. You actually did some repaints for me of some of the customs, and they were phenomenal. And
I remember you going, how did you make their sheaths look like there's nothing in them?
Yeah, you actually like put a little black on the top of the sheath, right? The attention to detail was phenomenal. But I've actually been working. I sent an email to Craig just last week trying to get him to, because I know that there's some promotional stuff getting sent out to creators. And I want to get a couple of the minis sent out to you just for painting tutorials. I think it'd be really cool to see you do that. And I know some of these minis will really sing with even a relatively simple paint job. Just because there's so much detail on there. If you just give them a wash and like a couple colors, like I think, I mean, people talk about speed painting. I haven't really gotten into it. I mean, I probably will when this stuff comes out. But I mean, I think some of these minis are just going to look incredible. There's like that. There's a couple of them that really, I think when you look at them unpainted, you're not getting what's there. Like the one that's the mound of bugs.
Mm-hmm.
That thing is. I don't think you can really see the detail on it when it just looks like a mass of orange plastic. But if somebody painted that right, that is a terrifying mini.
Right.
Speaking of the little detail painting, for those of you who are familiar with Heroscape and are familiar with the Phantom Knights figures that are the sort of day glow green, I just did a dark wash, which is where you mix roughly 30% paint with 40. I'm sorry, my brain stopped working. 70% water, and then you just hit the figure with it and dab it off on the higher sections. There's so much detail in those minis that I was shocked at how neat they look once you dark wash them, because otherwise it's just one solid bright green color.
Yeah, the Mountain Dew Warriors, they just look like a blob of green. But then, yeah, I've seen yours and they look way better. And that's like a 30-second paint job. I mean,
And at that, if I go slow.
Yeah.
I got a question in from Roland, who says, do you think if this is funded, a more affordable entry point for new players will be released?
I mean, again, I can't
really
talk
speak
to what they're going to do, but I have to assume that there will be. I mean, I've heard some stuff about some things like that I can't get specifics of, but I have to assume there will be cheaper stuff that comes along. I mean, one of the things is that it is hard in the current market. Like, I mean, people who are complaining about this stuff will say, "Oh, I mean, I got my Rise of the Valkyrie set at Walmart for $40 in 2005," which, I mean, was an unbelievable value for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to get something like the D&D Master set with unpainted minis, which is the minimum that you could do and still have a playable, scenarios and game with enough minis. So like something that was like a dozen minis and like a quarter of the terrain that's going to be in this thing. I mean, it's still going to be like $90 probably, right? Even with unpainted minis. That's just the where the economics of miniature gaming is right now. So that's so. I mean, I'm hopeful that there will be something like that has a cheaper price point at some point. But I also really hope this gets backed as it is. So we'll see. We'll see. And
I've seen some backers already say that they're buying the extra sets with the intention of selling the individual figures to people who didn't want the whole thing. Because my question that got answered back when I was looking at, I was going to back this no matter what, because I love Heroscape. But I was like, if it's $250 and there's units, are they common units? Because I want at least 2, if not 3 or 4 of every common unit to make them viable in a game. And the designers were great at realizing that was a bad idea. So every unit in it is unique. So as a player, you only need one set as far as the total number of units,
right? Unless
if you want to have doubles of units for when your opponent chooses, if you want to play the same units against same units.
Right. The set that the 250 set is all what's called unique figures in Heroscape, which means you can't play more than one of any of them in the same army. So it's not like you would want to buy multiple sets so you could, run 2 Iron Lich Viseros or whatever figure you please. You would have the only reason you would want to is if both players wanted to play the same figure. So yeah,
that sounds like a great decision to make. There's the living card games scene. They redid L5R, and it's like, oh, you still need to buy 2 or 3 sets to be able to have like the actual number of cards you need to make legal decks. And I'm like, that's dumb. You're dumb.
Yeah. It's that kind of thing frustrates the heck out of me. So I'm glad that it worked that way. And there will be common packs in future releases where there'll be literally just common. So if you want to buy 3 squads of the then you will just buy them.
So coming in from YouTube, we've got Joe who's asking, when designing for AOA or C3V, the figure comes first, then what's next? The powers or stats?
So in C3V, that was always the process where C3V was the custom area, where basically we would, we had. I didn't spend a ton of time trolling for minis. We had other people in the group who that was their jam, was to kind of troll for minis and try to, yeah. And then once we would commit to designing for mini, then we'd be like, okay, well, this is the mini. Let's brainstorm designs for it, and then we'd figure something out. Once we were like, okay, yeah, we got something, not necessarily that's complete, but like we're confident we're going to run with this, then we'd announce it, and that it would often take us another year or two, or in a few outlier cases, multiple years to actually get it all the way through to a fully play tested design. But yeah, we always started with yeah, that's a mini that we want to design for in C3V. In AOA, it started with make a faction that's this theme. Steampunks, cyborgs, etc.
I always got the impression with the custom figures with C3V is that it was based on trying to find a figure that was relatively cheap and easy to find, so that way everybody could get it.
Availability was always the discussion. Of course, that's something I haven't had to deal with in area, which is nice. But basically, yeah, I would be told, make a faction that had, or design remakes of all the figures from the Storm of Morrow box. That was just and then you would make the designs, and then the art would come back, and I would sort of rework my designs based on, or adjust my designs based on what I saw. Or in some cases, I was like, no, that's exactly what was in my head. No notes, perfect. And then that's basically the same process from there. It was refine the design, play test the design, come back, refine it more, go back and forth until you're solid on it. Then go over the words with a fine-tooth comb. That was one of the people we brought in at the late in the process of Age of Annihilation development. Don Zimmerman, he's just the best there is out there when it comes to attention to detail in card wording. So the two of us spent hours and hours just going through all the wording of every card in this box.
Yep, so bad wording will bite you in the butt, as we've seen with Magic.
Yeah, for
sure. Yeah, I was going to say that's definitely a Magic issue.
Michael asks, what's the pace of the AOA design compared to the C3V design?
Well, one benefit that we've had in the customs community was a lack of deadlines. A benefit to any curse, right? So I would say that AOA designs, there was definitely an acceleration in the pace as we got closer to the announcement time, to the release of the in July, or when people found out about it, and then again heading into August and September and October, when we knew that we had to have the designs pretty much done because people were going to start to see them. So it definitely was. There was more time pressure than we've ever experienced in the customs community. In the customs community, you just release it when you're done with it. You don't have to. There's no stress.
I'd like to circle back and mention that same thing that Justin had mentioned on here, that when you said common packs, people should know that these common packs are only coming if this project gets backed. And if you're looking to back it or want to look into more details about it, if you Google search just Heroscape Age of Annihilation, the first thing that pops up is the Hasbro Pulse, which takes you there. And we at Geek Tank are not at all being compensated or have Hasbro as a sponsor for us. So this is purely us talking like that. Adam's on the design team, so that's why he's a guest on here, because he can give us insight that we don't have.
Yeah, our sponsors are Geekway. Oh wait,
we did that already.
We did that already.
So, if you need a larger house to store your Heroscape stuff, you should contact Geekway Homes.
It's a pretty big. Geekway Homes is great.
I'm just scanning back through to see if I missed any questions that we want to hit.
Jeez, guy.
Yeah.
What? I'm plugging the guy. The guy. He's cool.
We're coming up on our last 5 minutes, so I was double checking here to see. Yep. Is there anything we haven't covered that you think we should cover, Adam?
Oh yeah, Jonathan's actually asking how much time are you currently spending on AOA?
Well, I mean, a little less now than I was a couple weeks ago, when we were really trying to make sure we were ready for this. And I'm still heading through. I'm still spending a decent amount of time talking through designs. We meet with Craig regularly. I mean, it's a decent amount of my free time, and it was definitely really, really tough to kind of keep this secret from the community. It was kind of driving me insane, to be honest. To not tell anybody about it until the initial announcement in July. Like it wasn't even that it wasn't even that I couldn't like say specifics of design. Just I couldn't even say I was working on it or that it was coming back.
Mhm.
And it definitely like affected my ability to spend time on the other custom stuff. But I couldn't explain to people like why I was freaking out so much. So it was it was yeah, I mean it's been a fun process for sure. It's been super exciting to have a chance to work on it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think we'll take Ronald's question as the last question, then we'll go ahead and close it out. Is there any kind of digital support that anyone has been speaking about, such as continued scenario support, errata, or apps, or anything like that?
I haven't heard anything specific about any of that. It has been talk about. I know that Craig has spent a lot of time working on the scenarios specifically. So, I haven't really gotten a chance to dig into those too much, but I'm sure that we'll be working on them in advance of the actual release. We've been talking about some relatively minor rules updates. Sort of just some things that are a little bit unclear in the original rule set. Not trying to dramatically change anything, but just to make the rules a little bit clearer about the way that people actually play the game. Things like that.
And if you haven't heard of the Heroscapers.com,
I agree.
There's lots of resources on there of custom scenarios and support and stuff and discussions on there. I recommend people should go check that out if they're interested in Heroscape. As we're coming to the end, I did realize we're not really sponsored by these guys, but they're coming up next week, and I want to give them a shout out because we have covered them as a podcast before. Mile High Con is coming up October 21st to 23rd. They'll be down in the DTC area at, I believe, the Marriott, Denver Marriott Tech Center.
Correct. We're not sponsored by them, but a lot of us work on it or have friends that work on it, or
yeah,
the idea.
And usually, I would say we could probably just show up with our camera and say, "Can we cover your convention?" And they'll throw passes at us because they're really
usually
cool like that.
That's generally what happens.
But they recognize us in our Geek Tank jerseys. So.
And actually, I agree with Donald. I hope you're a guest again with us, Adam. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be Heroscape stuff. It could be anything really. And
I'm not as much of a specialist in anything else.
Hi, Taylor. It's not a dumb question. We've been working on the new Kickstarter that's been coming up for Heroscape. So that's what we're kind of talking about here with Adam. So there you go.
Yep, we were just covering back questions, and this will be stored on Facebook and YouTube and that, so you can always go back and watch it. But don't be surprised if we can't answer your questions at that point, because then it's just recorded as at that point.
I've tried; it just doesn't work. The time machine's broken. It's really sad.
It's like trying to edit in a post. We just can't do it.
We just don't do it. That's not what happens in Geek Tank. We just let it crash.
Yep. I'm going to take us back to our normal format. Now we're all mixed up.
I got it. I got this under control. Okay. I got this. See, we can move things.
Sweet. And thank you to all the new viewers. Really appreciate you coming out and watching us.
Yeah.
We do our live show every Monday, 9 to 10 Mountain Standard Time. And if you miss it live, you can always go back and watch our old stuff. And we cover a huge variety of topics because that's what we do. We're just trying to bring the geek community together. And there's a ton of stuff in the geek community to learn about.
Sometimes we'll just talk about whatever you're talking about over there in the motor pool. So that's totally reasonable.
It's on that side. It's on that side.
That side.
Thank
you again, Adam, for being our guest. And I think that's about all the time we've got for today. So until next week, I've been Guy.
I've been Troy.
And I've been Alex.
And this is Geek Tank.
You're waiting on me to do it, aren't you?
I'm waiting for you to do it. Push the button.